Decca stood frozen as the loud banging on her door continued. Her heart raced, wondering who could be so impatient this early. It was supposed to be a calm morning in her new apartment, the home she had dreamed about for years. She had finally built something for herself, a small space that felt peaceful, safe, and hers alone. But when she opened the door, her peace shattered in seconds. Her mother was standing there, eyes burning with anger. "Get out, Decca. This is Jero's apartment. You've got no right to be here," she screamed. Decca blinked, unable to believe what she was hearing. Behind her mother stood her father, silent but cold, his eyes refusing to meet hers. And beside them was Jero, her brother, smirking proudly as if he had already won some invisible fight. Decca's throat went dry. She wanted to speak, to ask what was happening, but the words refused to come out. Her hands trembled as she looked at them. The people she had sacrificed everything for, now standing at her door to throw her out. Her mother pushed the door wider and stepped inside like she owned the place, while Decca took a step back, shocked and helpless. Neighbors began to peek from their doors, whispering, curious about the drama. Decca could feel their eyes on her, their phones already lifting to record. Shame burned her chest. This was her home, her safe place, yet she was being humiliated right in front of everyone. Her mother's voice grew louder, filled with rage. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Living in your brother's house like you own it." Decca shook her head, tears forming, but no one cared to listen. Jero folded his arms, enjoying the scene, pretending to look calm while his grin said everything. He wanted her gone. Her father finally spoke, his tone low but firm. "Just pack your things, Decca. Don't make this harder." The words hit harder than a slap. She stared at him, the same man she had supported when he lost his job, and realized he didn't see her as a daughter anymore. The hallway grew quiet except for her mother's angry breathing. Decca wanted to scream, to defend herself, to remind them this was her apartment, bought with her own money. But something inside her broke. She stayed silent, standing tall even as her tears fell, knowing deep down that this was just the beginning of a painful truth. Before that terrible day at her door, Decca's whole life had been about sacrifice. She had built everything from nothing. Years ago, when her father lost his job and her mother became sick, the family's world started to fall apart. Bills piled up, rent was due, and there was never enough food in the house. Decca was only a teenager then, but she didn't think twice. She dropped out of school to help them survive. While her friends were studying and dreaming about the future, Decca was learning how to survive one long, hard day at a time. At night, she worked in a noisy call center, speaking to strangers while fighting to keep her eyes open. In the morning, she went straight to a small bakery, her hands covered in flour, her body aching from lack of sleep. On weekends, when most people rested, she cleaned offices, scrubbing floors, washing windows, and collecting the leftover food others threw away. She told herself it was only temporary, that one day her parents would be proud of her. But that day never came. Jero, her younger brother, never lifted a finger. He stayed home, playing games, going out with friends, and posting pictures online about his soft life. Her parents adored him. They called him their pride, their hope, their future. Whenever visitors came, they would brag about Jero's intelligence and good looks, but they never mentioned Decca's sacrifices. She was invisible, just the daughter who worked too much. Every month, when her paycheck came, she sent almost all of it home. She paid the rent, bought groceries, and even paid Jero's university fees. When there was not enough money, she skipped meals. Once, she worked 2 extra shifts just to buy her father a new pair of shoes. He didn't thank her, he only said, "You should do more for your brother." Years passed, and Decca finally managed to save enough to buy a tiny apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, a place where no one could shout at her or use her. She cried the day she got the keys, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time, she felt free. But when her family found out, they didn't see her hard work or her pain. They didn't say congratulations. They said, "If you bought a house, it means you've been hiding money from us." In their eyes, her success was not hers. It was something they deserved too. And that was the moment Decca realized. No matter how much she gave, it would never be enough for them. A few days before that morning, Decca started noticing something strange. Her landlord kept calling, asking odd questions about her apartment. He wanted to confirm whose name was on the lease, when she had moved in, and if she was planning to leave soon. At first, she thought it was a simple misunderstanding, but when the calls continued, she began to worry. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't imagine how deep the betrayal would go. Then everything became clear. Jero had gone to the landlord's office pretending to be the owner of her apartment. He carried fake papers with forged signatures and even official-looking stamps. With his smooth talk and confident smile, he convinced the landlord that the apartment actually belonged to him. And as if that wasn't enough, he told the cruelest lie, that Decca was his ex-girlfriend who refused to move out after their breakup. The moment she heard that, her stomach turned. She couldn't believe her own brother would say something so disgusting. When Decca confronted Jero, he didn't deny it. He sat on the couch, his phone in his hand, looking amused. "You wouldn't even have this place without my money," he said with a smirk. "So, technically it's mine." Decca stared at him, confused and furious. "Your money? You've never even paid for your own food, Jero. Every penny I earned went to help this family, including you." But he only laughed louder, like her pain was entertainment. What broke her heart more was what happened next. Her parents were there too, sitting in silence. They didn't stop him. Her mother even said softly, "He's your brother, Decca. Don't fight him. He just wants what's fair." Fair. The word echoed in her head. How could they call this fair? She had spent years building a life for herself, giving them everything she had, and now they were helping Jero steal the one thing she owned. The days after that were torture. The landlord stopped calling her by name and started avoiding her. Neighbors began to whisper, unsure who to believe. Some looked at her with pity, others with judgment. Decca could feel the walls closing in, her reputation slipping away because of one cruel lie. She cried at night, staring at the papers that proved the apartment was hers, wondering how her own blood could betray her so easily. It wasn't just Jero's lie that hurt, it was the truth she finally saw. Her family never saw her as a daughter. They saw her as a tool, someone to use until she had nothing left, and now that she had something of her own, they wanted to take that too. The noise outside Decca's apartment kept growing. Her mother's angry voice echoed through the hallway, and neighbors were already whispering. Before Decca could even speak, her mother pushed the door wide open and stormed inside as if she owned the place. "How dare you lock us out of Jero's apartment?" she shouted, her face red with anger. "After everything we did for you." Decca stood frozen, her chest tight. Her father followed behind quietly, folding his arms, not saying a word. But his silence hurt more than any insult. It reminded her that he would never defend her, not even when she was right. Her mother started walking around the living room, inspecting the walls, the furniture, the things Decca had worked years to buy. "You think you can take what belongs to your brother?" she snapped. "You've always been jealous of him." Decca felt her throat burn, her eyes filling with tears. She wanted to scream the truth, that she paid for everything in this house with her own sweat, her own sleepless nights, her own sacrifices. She wanted to remind them how she worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table, when no one else did. But she didn't. She stood there quietly, realizing how pointless it was. They never listened. They never cared. When she was younger, she cried for their attention. When she got sick, no one checked on her. When she brought home money, they praised Jero instead, saying he was lucky to have such a helpful sister. Now, even after everything, they were still here, trying to take away the only thing she had earned for herself. Decca's hands trembled, but she didn't move. Her mother kept shouting, calling her ungrateful, selfish, and disrespectful. Each word hit her like a stone, breaking something deep inside her heart. Her father stood by the door, eyes fixed on the floor, pretending not to hear. Decca turned to him, her voice small. "Dad, you know I bought this apartment. You know I worked for it." But he said nothing. Not even a nod. That silence told her everything. She was alone. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but they felt different this time. They weren't tears of weakness or fear. They were tears of exhaustion, from years of trying to prove her worth to people who had already decided she didn't matter. As her mother's voice echoed through the apartment, Decca felt something shift inside her. A quiet strength began to rise, stronger than the pain. For the first time, she understood that family wasn't always love. Sometimes, it was the weight you had to let go of to finally breathe. The shouting inside Decca's apartment could be heard all the way down the hallway. Her mother's voice was sharp and angry, her words filled with blame and bitterness. Decca stood still, quietly trying to hold herself together. Her father leaned against the wall, silent as always, while Jero sat smugly on the couch like he was already the owner of the house. The noise had grown so loud that several neighbors had stepped out of their doors to see what was going on. Phones were raised. Whispers spread. Everyone could hear the argument now. Just when her mother shouted again, accusing Decca of stealing her own apartment, a calm but strong voice interrupted. "Madam, enough," the voice said. Everyone turned toward the door. It was Mr. Tund, the retired schoolteacher who lived next door. He was respected in the building. A man who never liked trouble but always spoke the truth when needed. He stepped forward slowly, his hands behind his back, his expression firm. "This girl," he said, pointing at Decca, "paid for that apartment. I saw her move in myself. She came with her lawyer and the property manager. I even helped her carry some of the boxes." The room went silent for a moment. Decca's mother's face turned red. "Stay out of family matters, old man," she snapped. But it was too late. Everyone had heard him. The whispers grew louder in the hallway. Someone said, "So it's her place after all?" Another whispered, "They tried to steal from their own daughter?" A few neighbors began recording quietly with their phones. The truth was spreading fast, and there was no way to hide it anymore. Jero stood up quickly, trying to look calm. "He's lying. He doesn't know what he's talking about," he said, but his voice shook slightly. Mr. Tund crossed his arms. "Young man, you came here last week with fake papers. I warned the landlord not to believe you. I told him the apartment belonged to Decca. Don't test me." Decca's mother looked around, realizing the crowd outside had grown. Faces she knew, people from church, neighbors who once admired her, were all standing there, watching. Her confidence began to fade. The same woman who had walked in so sure of herself now looked small and uneasy. Her eyes darted between the neighbors and Decca, her mouth opening but no words coming out. For the first time, Decca saw something she had never seen before. Her mother's pride breaking. The lies were falling apart in front of everyone. It wasn't just a private fight anymore. The world was seeing their greed, their cruelty, their manipulation. And as the whispers filled the hallway, Decca stood a little straighter. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. The truth had finally spoken. And this time, it came from someone who had seen everything. Decca's hands were shaking, but her face stayed calm. The noise in the room was deafening. Her mother yelling, Jero trying to explain himself, and neighbors whispering in the doorway. For a moment, Decca wanted to cry or scream, but she stopped herself. She had spent her whole life being silent while they walked over her. Not today. Taking a deep breath, she turned and walked toward her bedroom. Her mother's voice followed her, calling her a liar, but Decca ignored it. She opened her drawer and pulled out a brown folder, the one thing that held her truth. When she came back to the living room, everyone went quiet. The neighbors leaned closer, curious. Her parents watched her with confused faces. Decca placed the folder carefully on the table, right between her mother and Jero. "Here," she said softly. "Read the name on it." Her voice was calm, but inside her chest, her heart was pounding. Her mother grabbed the folder quickly, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. The first page showed the title deed with bold letters, Decca Fola Aramu, the official owner. For a few seconds, the room stayed silent. Her mother's face changed from shock to anger. Her lips tightened, her eyes burning with disbelief. "You stole this from Jero," she shouted. "You always wanted to outshine your brother." Jero nodded immediately, supporting her lie. "Exactly. She used my savings, and now she's pretending it's hers." Decca couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Your savings," she said quietly. "The money I earned, the money I sent every month so you could eat, so you could go to school. That's what you're calling yours now." She turned to her mother. "I didn't steal anything. I just stopped letting you take everything from me." Her mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. The neighbors were still there, watching every moment. Someone whispered, "Her name's on the paper. It's her house." Another said, "They should be ashamed." The weight of their judgment filled the air. Jero tried to grab the documents, but Decca pulled them back quickly. "You've lied enough," she said firmly. Her voice didn't shake this time. She looked at her mother, the woman she had loved so deeply, and felt something inside her finally break free. All my life, you told me I wasn't good enough. You made me believe I owed you my happiness. But not anymore. This is mine. Every tile, every wall, every bulb mine. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of anger, the kind that came from losing control. She turned her face away, unable to look at Decca, and as the silence stretched across the room, Decca finally felt it, the quiet strength of knowing she no longer had to prove her worth. The truth was right there, written in her own name. The shouting had reached its loudest point. Decca's mother was still arguing, Jero was pacing angrily, and the neighbors were whispering by the door. Then came a loud knock, firm and heavy. Everyone froze. Decca looked toward the door, unsure who it could be. Her mother frowned, while Jero muttered something under his breath. The knock came again, louder this time. When Decca opened the door, 2 police officers were standing there. One of them spoke in a calm but serious voice. We received a disturbance call. What's happening here? Before Decca could speak, Jero stepped forward confidently, pretending to be in control. Officer, he said, pointing at Decca. This woman is illegally living in my apartment. She refuses to move out even though I've asked her many times. He crossed his arms, trying to look like the victim. Decca stood silently, holding back her emotions. The officer glanced at Jero, then at Decca, noticing her calmness. And you are? The officer asked him. I'm the owner, Jero said quickly. She's my ex-girlfriend who won't leave. The officer frowned. Your ex-girlfriend? He repeated, looking doubtful. Decca took a slow breath and stepped forward. Sir, my name is Decca Fola Aramu, she said. This is my apartment. She handed over the folder with her property documents. The officers opened it and began reading carefully. After a few seconds, one of them looked up and said, her name is clearly written here. She's the legal owner. He turned back to Jero. Sir, making false ownership claims is a serious offense. Are you aware of that? Jero's fake smile began to fade. No, it's a misunderstanding, he stammered. She used my money. But the officer interrupted sharply. Do you have any proof of that? Jero hesitated, glancing nervously at his mother. She opened her mouth to speak but quickly closed it again, realizing the officers were recording everything on their body cameras. The second officer stepped forward. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us to clear this up at the station. Jero's face turned pale. What? You can't be serious, he protested, but the officers didn't argue. They took his arm and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The clicking sound made the room go still. The neighbors outside gasped quietly, watching as the man who had lied so confidently was now being led away in shame. Decca's mother stood frozen, her lips trembling. She looked at her son being taken away, but couldn't find any words to defend him. Her father quietly turned his eyes away, avoiding Decca's gaze. For once no one shouted. No one accused her. The truth had spoken louder than all their lies, and as the officers led Jero out of the building, Decca finally felt the weight she had carried for years begin to lift from her shoulders. After the police left with Jero, everything inside the apartment went quiet. The neighbors who had gathered outside slowly walked away, whispering to each other. The tension that had filled the air was gone, but what replaced it was a deep, heavy silence. Decca stood in the middle of the room, breathing slowly, feeling both exhausted and free at the same time. Her mother stared at the floor, clutching her handbag tightly, while her father sat on the edge of the couch, his face pale and tired. No one spoke for a long time. The apartment that once echoed with shouting now felt like it was holding its breath. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking every second of silence. Decca looked around. This was her space, her home, the place she had built with her own hard work. And for the first time, it felt like it truly belonged to her. Her father finally broke the silence. His voice was soft, almost breaking. Decca, he said quietly, not looking at her. We didn't mean to hurt you. His words hung in the air, unsure, like they didn't know where to land. Decca turned her eyes toward him. The same man who had stood by and watched as her brother insulted her. The same man who had said nothing when her mother ordered her around. She looked at him not with anger, but with the deep sadness of someone who had finally stopped expecting better. Yes, you did, she said simply. You just didn't care enough to stop. Her words were calm, but they carried years of pain behind them. Her father looked away, his eyes wet. Her mother's lips trembled, though Decca couldn't tell if it was from shame or anger. She looked like someone who wanted to speak, but didn't know how. For years she had been the loudest voice in the house, always right, always in control. But now there was nothing left to say. The silence stretched on again, heavy and uncomfortable. Then slowly her father stood up. Without another word, he picked up his jacket. Her mother followed, still avoiding Decca's eyes. She stopped by the door for a moment, her fingers tightening on the handle, as if she wanted to turn back. But she didn't. The door closed softly behind them. That gentle click sounded louder than all their shouting from earlier. To Decca, it wasn't just a door closing, it was an ending. The end of years of being blamed, ignored, and treated like she didn't matter. The end of trying to win their approval. She stood there for a while, looking at the closed door. For the first time, she didn't feel small or unwanted. She felt strong. The silence in the room no longer hurt. It felt peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes after a long, painful storm, calm, clean, and full of new beginnings. Months went by, and Decca's life began to change in quiet but powerful ways. The apartment that had once felt heavy with pain slowly became her sanctuary. She painted the walls a soft golden color that caught the sunlight beautifully in the morning. The furniture she chose was simple but full of warmth, pieces she bought with her own money, symbols of her independence. A small bookshelf stood by the wall, filled with her favorite design magazines, sketchpads, and books about women who rebuilt their lives from nothing. Near the window, she placed a small green plant that she watered every morning. It became her daily reminder that growth takes time, but it always comes. From that very same apartment, Decca started her design company. At first, it was just her and an old laptop, creating digital designs and home decor layouts for small clients. But word spread quickly about her unique sense of style and her story of strength. People admired not just her work, but the courage it took to stand up for herself after everything she had gone through. She poured her heart into every project, making each one reflect beauty, peace, and confidence, the very things she had once been denied. Soon, her company grew faster than she had imagined. She hired a few young women who reminded her of herself, women who had been overlooked or underestimated. Together, they built something inspiring. Every day, laughter filled her apartment as they brainstormed designs and shared dreams over cups of tea. Her living room, once a place of shouting and humiliation, now echoed with creativity and joy. Then one morning, everything changed again. A popular online magazine published her story, how she had faced betrayal from her own family, but still rose above it with grace and determination. The article called her the woman who turned pain into power. Her face appeared on blogs, TV interviews, and social media pages across Africa. People celebrated her as a symbol of self-made success and emotional strength. But fame didn't change Decca. She remained humble, grateful for the peace she had finally earned. Her family, seeing her success, began calling and sending messages. Her mother left long voicemails, crying and apologizing. Her father wrote letters filled with regret. Even Jairo tried to reach out, pretending to care. But Decca didn't respond. She had learned that some people only remember your worth when the world begins to see it. One evening, as she sat by the window watering her little plant, she opened her journal and wrote something that captured everything she felt. Love without respect is just manipulation with a smile. It was short, but it said everything. Decca finally had the one thing her family could never give her, peace built entirely by her own hands. Years later, Decca stood on the balcony of a tall glass building, the cool city breeze brushing her face. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, filled with lights, life, and promise, a reflection of how far she had come. Below her, a crowd had gathered, cameras flashing, banners waving. On the front of the building, her company's name glowed in silver letters, Fola Designs Tower. It was her biggest achievement, a symbol of everything she had built from pain, strength, and determination. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, she heard her name being cheered by employees, partners, and young designers she had mentored over the years. Their eyes sparkled with admiration. Many of them had been women like her, once unheard, once underestimated, now thriving under her guidance. It was more than a business for Decca, it was a movement. A home for dreamers who had been told they didn't belong. She held the scissors, her hands steady, her heart calm. The flash of cameras didn't bother her. This was her moment. Not for revenge, not for pride, but for peace. As the ribbon fell, applause filled the air. She smiled, but her eyes wandered to the back of the crowd. Standing quietly were her mother and father. They looked older now, smaller somehow. The years had softened their pride and filled their faces with regret. Her mother's hands trembled as she clutched her purse, eyes glistening. Her father's shoulders were slouched, his once firm posture broken by years of guilt. They didn't call her name. They didn't move forward. They just stood there, silently watching the daughter they once threw out, the same daughter who had once begged for their love. Decca met their eyes for a brief moment, and for the first time, she felt no anger, no pain, only peace. A gentle smile formed on her lips as she turned back toward the crowd. The people clapped, the music played, and the sound of celebration filled the air. But in her heart, there was only quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when you finally make peace with your past. She whispered softly to herself, words she had carried for years, words that now defined her journey. Home isn't where they welcome you. It's where you no longer have to beg to belong. And in that moment, Decca knew she had truly come home. Not to a family that once rejected her, but to a life she built with her own strength, her own love, and her own worth. The city stretched before her, shining like her future, limitless and entirely hers.